This video tutorial is going to show the user how you can replace point supports, fixed or pinned supports, or a roller, a fixed roller, a pinned roller, etc. for a spring at columns in Adapt Builder. This would also pertain to walls using a line spring. So by default, if we go to criteria, analysis and design options, we can see we set up our default support conditions here. For multi-level analysis, global analysis, we have this set to fixed, and the user can also retain any of those supports per some customization. So that we're going to have to use that option. That modification is retained until you actually delete out the supports and reset them. So before we actually run the analysis, we can see what the assignments are for the supports. If we go up here to model, and from supports, the supports panel, we're going to select create supports. And those supports are a little bit small. We'll go over here to visibility and just scale those up a bit so we can see them more clearly. I'll say the symbol size we're going to use is 20. Okay, and if I double click, that's going to be fixed. That's per the setting that we just showed. This is not actually required to be done before we analyze. If we analyze without actually selecting this option, the program will just go ahead and do this for us automatically. The reason I'm showing these is I want to be able to do a user modification and replace two of these supports with springs. So we're going to do that to this middle row of columns. I'll just go to a side view and I'm going to select those two supports. You can see those are selected. I'll go to modify the selection and we'll go to point support. I'll go to this option for degree of freedom and we're going to deselect translation and rotational degrees of freedom, and we're going to call this a user selection. So if I select OK and I double click, those will be released. And now what I can do is I can just switch back over to single level and go down to the bottom plane. So at the bottom plane, I'm now going to go to a top view and I'm going to go back to model and I'm going to add a spring. This will be a point spring. I'll model a point spring at that location here and there. And going back to the 3D view, we can see the point spring there. If I double click on this, I can define the different spring stiffness values both for XYZ directions and also for rotational ZZ, XX, and YY. And this is a compression only spring. So we'll just leave the default value there. And that's the same for this one. Okay. If we then come back to global mode, we've essentially replaced that point support with a spring by setting the degrees of freedom here, basically deselecting and turning those off and then replacing it with the spring. So now I'm going to analyze. I'll go ahead and mesh this. We're going to expect some settlement there, differential settlement relative to the two outer bays of columns. I'll go ahead and execute the analysis now. Once I do that, if I go to view analysis results and I just look at the vertical deformation in the system, this is under service total, for example. I'll go ahead and just show the 3D view. You can see these two columns are syncing. We can go ahead and animate that. Now that's obviously exaggerated, but I could look at the vertical displacement, for example, in the frame elements. I'll turn on the contours. You can see these line diagrams, and if I turn on the 1, 2, 3 for numerical display, this is the actual displacement relative to the springs that I input for those two columns. And you could adjust that stiffness as needed vertically for your own particular project. But this is how you would go about replacing the supports with springs for those supports. And the reactions for the springs would then be defined under report, analysis reactions, point spring reactions. That will launch a Word document, an RTF document showing the point spring reactions for this system. And back in the main viewer, we can see other result actions for these two columns. So we can isolate under the analysis tab. I can select, for example, one of the combinations, service total again. We can go back to column actions for combinations, and we can see that this is carrying very little load relative to the outer columns, but you can go through here and check actions and so on. If you have any questions about this, please let us know at support@adaptsoft.com. Thank you.